Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome back to Swan Signal Live. October is here with a bang. We've been talking about it for months, or at least a couple of months, and here we are. Brushed up right against the all-time high, guys, at 123.7 or something. 123.9 is the all-time high, or close to it. So we're right up there. It took us a day, two and a half days of October to start scratching at that all-time high. So that's very exciting. We are here with three of the Swan Private crew. John, as always, my co-host. We've got Isaiah and Matt as well. These guys are becoming familiar to you now as our Swan Private squad kind of rotates into the show. So you can start stacking sats or really start building wealth. If you started to go down the rabbit hole, you can really start building wealth with Swan. We do it together with you. We form strong partnerships with all of our clients, a direct representative, Bitcoin expert, personal Bitcoin expert for you on the Swan Private Squad. So go to swan.com to check it out or download the app in the App Store. Just search for Swan Bitcoin. Lots to talk about besides scratching at the all-time high ceiling. It was an interesting week in macro, as always. Lots happening on the Bitcoin front as well. Maybe later in the show, we'll get into the core versus knots debate. I've been following it more closely the past few weeks, and there might be some listeners who'd like to get into that, and we might have time to do that today. In the meantime, let's dive into macro as we usually start things up. Actually, we've been shilling BTC and DC, right? This conference that happened at the Kennedy Center this past week, and we've been talking about it on the show for months now, and it finally happened this week, and two of our three Swan Private guys were at the event. So John and Isaiah, I wanted to give you guys a chance to talk about the event. What was it like? What was the vibe like? And who did you see there, etc.? I'll kick it off with John.
Yeah, what's up, everybody? So coming off 3 days at that event, overall really great, good content, lots of big names that everybody would know. And including Saylor, as well as some big political names, Cynthia Lummis and others, Pierre Rochard, Adam Back, Giacomo, Preston Pish, Isaiah, please fill in when you go with the other big ones I'm forgetting. But Corey, CEO of Swan, was there, and it was great. There was also coordination with GW University. That was kind of the impetus for this whole thing. It's like involve academia more in the Bitcoin world. Which I think is much needed. Every time I talk to someone who's like a friend or family friend and they have a kid who's in college and I'm chatting with them, I will always ask the question, do you hear of Bitcoin at any point, or if they just recently graduated or something? I'm like, does Bitcoin come up in any of your classes? And the answer is almost always no, unless they've said they have a teacher. Oh, my teacher like mentioned it for a second. That's like the most positive answer I've heard. So Bitcoin does need to be in classes more. That reminds me, Ella Huff did present the work that they're doing at Cornell. So that was another part of this. But yeah, great content. It was kind of a manageable crowd size, which I think is kind of cool because you get to see people more often. You don't feel like you're walking through an airport the whole time. And really good to see a bunch of guys from Swan. And then a ton of clients were there. So got to have good experiences with them, break some bread. So yeah, overall, just a very good 3 days. And would have been kind of cool if we got, 122, 123 on price while we were there. That would have just, lifted everyone up that much, because it feels like just yesterday Bitcoin was at 118K, because it was just yesterday that Bitcoin was at 118K. That's my dad joke there. I'll pass it over to Isaiah.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I like the dad jokes. You'll improve. The more kids, the better jokes. So, I'm looking forward to more. Yeah. So a couple other people there. And I agree, because it makes it approachable. People taking pictures with Max and Stacy in the hallway, Samson Mao there having good conversations, Adam Back getting heckled from an older gentleman in the crowd on the core and not stuff. Tim Kotzman and Jeff Booth, which you might have already mentioned, Jeff, but I'll throw that one out there. Yeah, and John's a great host. He planned a dinner that was going to be small, and it grew to much bigger, and I was able to go, and it was fantastic. Good conversations at the Swan booth with folks coming by. A couple people had mentioned, hey, I've seen you on TV or on Swan Signal Live, so that's always fun. So for those that watch, but a lot of folks that I think we're still exploring and looking at Bitcoin. And I had an opportunity to meet with a friend, actually, of a current Swan client that basically just got invited last minute. And so this was a guy, cocktail hour, we're just chatting. He's like, yeah, I'm kind of like a Bitcoin skeptic, but after 2 days here, he goes, I think my mind's been changed. And so he is in the commercial real estate space. It's been successful, good conversation with him. And so there are those kind of people that were coming as well. And a lot of folks in the audience tied into the political landscape. The one thing, and as Bitcoiners, we love to jab at politicians. There was some content in the second day, and because of the shutdown, people were like, I'm out of here. I'm not, which I think is hilarious because you have nothing better to do because the government's literally shut down. So get your little rear over and talk. So I don't know what happened there. It's kind of disappointing. I don't even know the names, or I'd shout them out so that people could know, but I can't remember. So it was a great event. Kennedy Center is amazing. It's a beautiful spot. And I know that there'll be future events as well. So if you missed it this year, there was multiple conversations with folks that are in the know that said it's definitely happening next year. So I think it'll be a good one for the future as well.
I heard the PubKey DC was going to open right around now. Did you guys get a chance to?
Wasn't open yet.
Wasn't open yet, yeah.
Why am I spacing out his name?
Thomas.
Thank you. Yeah, he had talked about, I think that was the goal, but I can imagine just like anything in DC, it takes time to get permits and things open. And I think they were really close, but not quite ready. But yeah, that'll be the spot. Everyone goes to dinner, post-event, and then the end of the night, everyone's going to be at PubKey. And I think that'll be a heck of a spot in the future.
And I think the plan is, if you've been to PubKey in New York, it's kind of a dive bar down in the basement, and it's got a great vibe, but it's pretty small. There is a gathering room in the back of the bar, but maybe 50 people could fit in there, 40 people. This is supposed to be a much bigger space from what I understand. That also includes maybe some like co-working space and event space, as well as the bar.
And Thomas talked about on his panel, like one of the goals being, for a lot of folks, they don't have the time to review and go through this, but for staffers and for other members of these different, teams on Capitol Hill, have them come to PubKey, have them come learn, right? And connect and break bread together on both sides of the aisle. And he talked about like, that's really the thesis for wanting to do all this stuff. Like obviously New York being the financial hub, and then you have the kind of the DC element as well. And so it was really interesting to hear on his panel that discussion of how thoughtful they are and how important, he talked about like just American history in pubs being such a big part for the changing of society. And it was just really, really cool. So that was one panel and conversation that stuck out for sure.
Yeah, it's where a lot of the conversations, it was like the Twitter of the day, right?
Correct.
You go to the town square / the pubs, and the pubs were probably where all the real conversations are happening, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. I hadn't thought about that. Well, we talked about Bitcoin at all-time highs, but it's not just the only asset that's at all-time highs right now. We've got the US 30, US 500, the Tech 100, the small cap 2000, all of them, at or exceeding all-time highs. We've got, in the meantime, the context of rate cuts, stagflation, perhaps stimulus checks, which have been mentioned and floated this week, 1 to 2K stimulus checks to be funded through the tariff revenue, and for Americans with household wealth or household income, under $100,000. Those are the numbers that are being floated. We've got money supply growing all over the world, and let's see, we've also got rate cuts, like we mentioned, all over the place. Here's some data on rate cuts, central banks around the world, and you can see the big spikes around 2008, 2009, and then the COVID spike. We had 196 cuts in a 12-month period, and we're at 168 cuts right now. So this is the environment in which all of these relatively scarce assets relative to the dollar are really spiking, and we've got rate cuts happening at the same time, and possible stimulus. So what do you guys think? Here's the stimulus check from 2020, 20 probably.
2020.
20, yep.
That's a fresh number, Brady?
This was I screenshotted this an hour ago, maybe.
Cool. Yeah,
so you're up 1,700%. Your $1,200 stimulus check, had you bought Bitcoin with all of it, would be worth $22,152 right now.
Seems like a decent store of value to me.
Yeah, it's nice when your store of value also appreciates so quickly. And this is where we are with the monetizing asset. We get to ride that appreciation up as adoption continues to grow. So pretty good deal. Front running all these institutions and governments, massive corporations that have still really yet to get into this asset, but they're trying to find ways to do it increasingly. And here we all are as mere plebs having stacked Bitcoin for 8, 9, 10 years in some cases. So pretty cool. I can't think of another example in history where such a asymmetric asset was so accessible to individuals long before it was accessible to businesses and governments.
Agreed. And I would also add to that, with such an ecosystem of education and passion around it. Like,
Yes.
maybe I always do point to the big tech stocks as you know, since like 1990, 1995, depending on the company, those have been just like absolute home runs. Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, Google, now Nvidia a little bit later. Some of them like kind of rival Bitcoin's gains, especially if you strip out like the first few years of Bitcoin where it went ridiculous, you know, from monetizing for the first time. But there wasn't like this education around. It wasn't like, hey, DCA into Apple stock, right? Like it's very few and far between with people who put their whole life savings in these tech stocks and held it for years and years and years. So Bitcoin, one of the many ways that Bitcoin is unique. And I'll just add on one more thing before someone else hops in. But that chart you showed on the rate cuts, Brady, I do think this is important. We're switching into a rate cutting cycle. There's no doubt about that. The one thing I would point out though is 2009 and 2020. Those were like cut to zero. This is a once in a lifetime crisis. QE for trillions of dollars. I don't think any of us are forecasting that is around the corner. We likely have higher lows on rates even within a cutting cycle here. Like I don't really think the Fed funds rate is going to get down to zero anytime soon. So just wanted to throw that out there, but we still are in a cutting cycle, and all things equal, lower rates should be positive for what we call risk assets, which includes Bitcoin, stocks, even gold as well.
Matt, any thoughts? I don't want to.
No, sorry guys. I've been kind of quiet over here. I think my 3-year-old took a tumble, and there was a lot of screaming going on. So I apologize. As we have four young kids here, my wife homeschool. So sorry about that. Yeah, I know. I mean, Bitcoin is the newest monetary asset and the best form of money. And I think we have the DXY also down something like 10% this year, right? So all this makes sense. Because we're in a debt-based system, the government's going to have to print more money. The markets realize this. We're seeing record gold highs. Bitcoin's going to follow. So it's an exciting time.
The great debasement trade, right? JPMorgan talking about that?
Love that.
Or is it Citi? I'm spaced on which one it was. But I mean, you see that. And I think the rate cutting chart, someone could look at that and say, that is bad, right? Because it's around 2008, 2009, awful time. Oh, right before COVID, that's a bad time. So that must mean, the market's in trouble. And I think ultimately it's this, call it bipolar bifurcation of the market of like, it's going to be a really bad time if you don't own assets. And so it's a lot of the same of what it's been. But if we go into this rate cutting cycle, Trump has said exactly what he wants to do. And I was listening to a macro podcast, and like a lot of what you can look at is, Trump is going to signal and tell everyone exactly what he wants to do. He wants rates to go to nothing. He wants to get rid of JPAL. He wants to run this thing hot. He tweeted that, we're going to grow our way out of this, right? What does that mean? GDP, we're going to grow. I'm trying to remember if it was Safedine or Booth or somebody like doing the math on what our GDP growth would have to be to really get out of this, quasi debt spiral. And it's something that we've never seen ever. And so the law of large numbers means that's probably not going to happen. And so the stimulus number that we just saw a little bit ago, well, that is a nominal return, even in real return, stats, right? You're buying more goods and services with Bitcoin. Same with gold. If you measure the S&P in gold terms, the S&P has not made an all-time high since the tech boom, right? And so it's important to understand, like, what are you measuring everything by? And I think that's the major theme as we move forward. It's hard assets over financial assets, and that's the big shift that we're seeing.
You mentioned the debasement trade. We have a tweet here talking about this JPMorgan analyst calling this this investment in Bitcoin and gold, and they define the trade as that it reflects a combination of factors which in our client conversations range from elevated geopolitical and policy uncertainty to uncertainty about the long-term inflation backdrop to concerns about debt debasement due to persistently high government deficits across major economies, to concerns about Fed independence, to waning confidence in fiat currencies in certain emerging markets in particular, and to a broader diversification away from the US dollar, to which Michael Saylor replies, yeah, we call it saving our money. Condense that 50-word word salad describing the debasement trade into, yeah, we call it saving our money. We call it stacking sats. We call it buy a Bitcoin. And this is exactly what we've been doing. I'm glad to see JPMorgan coming around to this idea that maybe we should hedge against all of these things, which amount to debasing the dollar.
I love it. Love his response. No, I love it.
Yeah,
it's great. And I feel like it's a sign to me that it's still early. Like, you still have the TradFi people that are coming up with like these like they still don't quite get it. Like, they still don't quite get like why this is all possible.
Yeah.
And they're coming up with that. Maybe this is just what they do. They come up with more complicated jargon to explain something that's super simple. So I love to see Saylor in the comments with that.
What a novelty, right? You can save your money without having to understand any of that word salad, right? This is the case with Bitcoin. We have not been able to save in the dollar for a long time because it has lost its store of value function simply because it is being debased so much. So it's cool to have something where you can just save your money without thinking about it.
Yeah, I don't want to have to be, a landlord or full-time, investment analyst to be able to just have my wealth continue through time, my savings, right?
Yep,
Finally, Bitcoin
exactly.
now fixes this.
And one of the things I talked about in there, and I don't know where I heard this recently, but it's like this idea of Fed independence, how, Trump is trying to get his way, tweeting, AI images of Jay Powell getting fired, et cetera, and putting pressure. That's not anything new. So Lyndon B. Johnson, there's a story that the Fed chair at the time basically invited him down to, I think he was in Texas somewhere, maybe Dallas, and basically berated him for 2 hours. At one point, there was an altercation where he basically lifted him up, almost choking him, telling him he had to cut rates. So like, there's been presidents that have put pressure on the Federal Reserve Chair in the past, and it is fairly, unfortunately, common where presidents see the money printer button and the easy money as a way to fix things and make themselves look good. And I think we're in a moment where, yes, we're seeing that, but it's not something that's the first time we've seen it in history. So, fun little fact that I learned that I will share.
Governments are getting in on the debasement trade as well. Lots of gold purchasing happening around the world. And the value, of course, with the gold going into, we're at all-time highs already, well beyond all-time highs, right? With gold.
Yes. Yeah.
3,900. Yeah.
Yeah, 3,900. So you can see the value of U.S. official gold holdings up to $1.1 trillion. Just imagine this number if we had still been on the gold standard, right? And we're accumulating gold to back the dollar. Things may not be in such a sticky situation with the dollar right now.
Well, and I think one of the things, again, going back to DC and the debasement trade, it's kind of like the Lawrence Lepard trade, right? He's been pro Bitcoin, pro gold for quite a while, and he had a panel, and he was talking about, if the U.S. really still had all its gold, because it's come under fire, right? That at Fort Knox, we really don't have the actual gold, hence why they kind of said, hey, we're going to audit it, but really we kind of just let that be memory hold, and we didn't get there. Next story, right? That it would really, really help, because it was in the conversation around the Bitcoin strategic reserve and like how it can actually help with paying off the deficit. And so looking at those things is interesting. And then I think if gold, which it'll probably close higher today, 7 straight weeks of up, that's pretty impressive. Like, that's a huge move for gold.
Yeah, Lynn Alden was talking about Bitcoin sort of catching up with gold because, in terms of gains over the past 12 months, because she thought that gold was a bit overbought at this point and Bitcoin underbought. but it's effectively the same or a similar trade. And so she sees Bitcoin outperforming gold over the next 6 to 12 months.
I think you're not going to get an argument from this panel here. That's for sure. I think the other reason that chart is interesting is because if the U.S. owns 1 trillion of gold, this is kind of related to the point you were making, Brady, which is like, let's compare that to a few things. One, whatever the amount of debt is that we have now, 37 trillion or something like that. So that's kind of the quote unquote real money, or one of the reserve assets that we have that, I don't want to say backs the debt because it's not a convertibility thing, but there is this like implicit idea of, okay, the reserve assets and many other things back a fiat currency. We don't really know what it is. Like, we're 54 years into this experiment, but we think that one of the assets that quote unquote backs it is gold. But they have 1 trillion, the U.S. government, relative to 37 trillion of debt. Another reason that number is interesting is because if it's 1 trillion that the U.S. government holds, if we can trust that they actually do hold that, you compare that to the total market cap of gold, which somewhere between 25 to 20 to 30 trillion. So if it's 1 out of 20, that's 5%. If it's 1 out of 30, that's like 3.33%. So the U.S. government has something between, call it 3 to 5% of the total market value of gold. And then you would want this does get into like the SBR conversation, because you then start saying, okay, well, maybe the US wants to have at least as much Bitcoin out of the total. Maybe they want to have more if they think we are headed into a world where gold is playing less of a role and Bitcoin's playing more. Maybe they want to have more. And one takeaway I will give from the conference, one of the political people was speaking. I can't remember who it was, but I think he made the point that it was like the ordering of priorities from the government was basically the Genius bill for stable coins, which they did pass, and then Clarity, which I think is still happening now, I believe. I don't know if that's fully passed, or if it is, you guys tell me. And then third would be SBR. So the third, the SBR is just not as important, and it is a much bigger sell, I think, for 2 reasons. One is that some politicians are just going to be like, hey, I don't care about this. And the other reason, I think, if you do have long-term oriented politicians within the government, you want to be really careful with how you acquire Bitcoin. And I could actually make an argument that the longer we go without an announced SBR, like the better it is for Bitcoin over the long term, because then they're being serious. They're like, hey, we're not just going to announce we bought $1 billion worth of Bitcoin just because we want to make good on, the campaign promise from a few years ago. That would be like a throwaway. If they're serious about Bitcoin being part of the financial system, part of reserve assets, like, you want them to do this in secretive for as long as possible and delay that announcement. So anyway, I think showing the gold that is owned by the government ends up leading to a whole bunch of different conversations.
Interesting. All right. I've got a video from our friend Wicked on Twitter. He posts awesome data visualizations about Bitcoin, a lot of them about the actual mining network and hash rate, etc. Here's one DCAing since 2020. And I will note real quick, I just looked, and we are like almost exactly 100% up from a year ago today. So, well, now you guys, I gave it away. I was gonna have you guys guess where we were a year ago today, and I just gave you the math. So yeah, we were about 58.9, so $59,000 a year ago today at 122.7 right now. So we're up a little over 101% just in this 1 year, and it feels like it's been a grind. It doesn't feel like there's been any sort of over exuberant animal spirits entering into the market. And if you kind of look at the chart, like a long-term full Bitcoin chart, this past year has just been this sort of steady, almost stair step up to where we are now. And to me, that signals, hey, we've crept up to these all-time highs, sort of under the radar right now, and there hasn't been a whole lot of fanfare You don't see Bitcoin being trumpeted on CNBC so often and by people who don't usually do it, right? Of course, Saylor's going to go on and talk about it, but there's not this exuberance happening around Bitcoin yet. And it seems like we will see that toward the end of a bull market, and we're probably feeling going into the fourth quarter with only 3 days into October that we may be seeing some big moves over the next few months. Yeah, go ahead, John, if you want to react to that.
I'll just say this reminds me of some of the conversations we were having at different, whether it's just coffee or lunch or seeing somebody in the hallway or at dinner at the event. Things that Bitcoiners love talking about. What could propel us to 140, 150 new all-time highs? Where do we think we'll end the year? Are cycles dead? We also talked about the fourth turning a lot, sovereign individual, and a little bit of ancient civilizations. And the pyramids and megalithic structures as well, of course,
as you must.
Just for good measure. But yeah, one of my takes was like, I still, when I look back at the two biggest runs up in the last couple of, like since November 2022, that low, what propelled us like in a really major way, it was the ETF launch propelled us to back to 70K for the first time and beyond. And then the next big one to 80, 90, 100K was the election. And like more acceptance of Bitcoin post that. So I feel like there would have to be a pretty explicit catalyst to get us to like 140, 150. And then if that's true, and maybe I'm wrong, by the way, maybe we just like grind higher up to 140, 150, just with like small adoption announcements here and there. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm saying I think there would need to be some sort of catalyst is my base case. I think the government announcing they're buying would definitely do that, but I don't think that's happening in the next 6 months. Other big if like some major company or major investment, like sovereign wealth fund or something, I think that could help. But yeah, I'll open it up to you guys. Like, do you think there is a catalyst on the horizon in the next like 3 to 6 months that you would say, yeah, if this happened, like this would definitely pave the way to 150K Bitcoin?
Yeah. Did aliens not come up on the conversation at all? Are you anything?
When we start down the ancient civilization topic, it doesn't go right to aliens, but then it usually, if you spend a long enough time on the topic, aliens will get brought up. Yes.
Okay. Glad to hear that. Anyways, yeah. So I would be thrilled if we are bored to death all the way up to 1 million. I'm in that camp of like, we're going to creep up slowly. We're going to hover around some next boring level. Maybe it's 130, right? Be there for weeks and then just slowly climb up. Looking at 2026, it's an election year, midterm elections in the US. I don't think we're gonna have a recession next year because of it. I think there's gonna be helicopter money or anything else to try to get things to be in good shape next year. So my base case is that we just continue, just climb higher. Like you said, John, with these kind of slow or smaller announcements that maybe get some excitement, maybe bump up 5, 10K are those big ones. But I don't think we're gonna see like just a huge, 50K run up or something, but we'll see.
I'll take the other side. I do think we see a big run up just because it makes for better entertainment for everyone watching. And it's truly what I think. One of the big things that coming back from, my previous life is kind of the traditional world. And so Morgan Stanley put out that they're actually going to allow buying and selling without solicited trades in Q1 of 2026, which means their advisors can actually go out and tell clients to buy it. Fortunate enough that I still have some connections into those spaces. And to date, they cannot go out and say you can buy a Bitcoin ETF. A client has to call in. They have to say they want it, and it has to be within certain parameters. And they are changing that come Q1. If Morgan Stanley does it, Bank of America and Merrill Lynch will do it. UBS will do it. Wells Fargo will do it. And the amount of capital in those spaces is massive. And I think that can be on the same level as the ETF launch, candidly, and bigger personally, because the bulk of the wealth that's out there, and it normalizes it. Because also, if I'm a financial advisor and I have an AUM shop and I charge 1%, do I want the best asset in the world that's going up by 40, 50, 60% in my client portfolios? Well, hell yeah, I do. I'm making a lot more money. I got a bigger bonus. Let's go. And it's a self-perpetuating cycle. Also, a lot of those firms, and even when I was at Merrill Lynch, back 2018, 2017, the big move was towards managed models. And so what BlackRock's going to come in and do is say, hey guys, for your aggressive models, you got to put 5% in. And they click rebalance, 5% goes into Bitcoin. Boom. That is absolutely ignition for a bigger move. So that's my take, is I think those kind of things do take a lot of time, but we're going to see that coming in Q1 2026. Trump is going to get his rate cuts. He is going to get rid of J-Powell next year. Is it the best thing for Bitcoin? I don't know. Is it the best thing for the United States? I don't know. But I do think that we're going to see a run it hot, easy money, and a lot of liquidity coming into Bitcoin. So that's my rant. And yeah,
sorry.
Go ahead, Matt.
I love your bullish attitude, and I feel like at some point we need to come back to your price prediction for year end, because that's super bullish too.
Yeah. Well, I revised it a little bit at DC, where I was lower than other people, and I was like, man, I must be losing it. So we'll see.
Let's take a look at the volatility of Bitcoin over the years. This goes back to 2013. And you can see the huge spikes in volatility. And then 2017, there was a massive run up to 20K, and 12 to 20K took like 2 weeks or something. So it was a huge part of that blow off top was very, very short period of time. And you can just see it grinding down, and volatility is just heading down toward gold, which is very low volatility compared to Bitcoin. But volatility is just decreasing more and more and more. And you would expect that as the network grows, it takes a lot more money to move the markets, just in terms of volume, the volume of dollars. And when you're at a smaller market cap, money can come in and really affect the price, the market price pretty quickly. That's part of it. I think it's also been, much more financialized than it has been ever in the past. And I think when you get more advanced financial professionals involved in an asset, you tend to get some, I think, less volatility, because the trading happens where you're capturing the kind of that volatility much more effectively and efficiently. And so they're kind of competing against each other on a smaller band of volatility in order to try to make dollars in a lot of cases. We can take a quick look at this. Here's the price chart over the past, let's see, about 15 years. This goes back to 2012. So yeah, 14 years. You can see the big spikes that we just looked at on the volatility chart, the corresponding spikes in price. They want me to buy this. Like the 2013 spike, the 2017 spike, and this is the 2021-ish bull run. And then you can just see this very steady, almost stair-step run from 2022, December of 2022, all the way up until the present. And this is the period where Bitcoin started becoming more financialized, big players coming into the market. So I think fundamentally we are seeing a change in Bitcoin's price action. All of that combined with the halvings just aren't having as much of an impact. Again, this is just the volume, right, is much smaller now. So the amount of Bitcoin that's being added to the network, every block is smaller. We've got over 19 million Bitcoin mined. I think it might even be creeping up to 19 and a half. So just the sheer addition, right, to the supply is getting very minimal compared to the already emitted supply. So to me, that means this effect that halvings would have on the scarcity of the supply emissions is becoming less and less impactful on price. So I think you can combine all of those factors, and I expect much lower volatility, steady climbs, like nothing more than 30% type level of runs to either direction. I think I would expect would be the maximum, because they're going to get shorted and traded down. If it's running up fast, it's going to get bought up if it's going down fast. So my expectation is we don't ever see again in Bitcoin an 80+% bear market. So I think we're much more in a narrow band of volatility, and we're going to be riding this thing up to $1 million over the next 3 to 5 years pretty steadily compared to the way it's been in the past. That's my anticipation.
It's mine as well. I will just say probably the funniest outcome would be some kind of parabolic Q4.
Yeah.
And then we die. Like, not necessarily, I don't think 80 is going to happen, but even like a really big run up and then a 60% drawdown would probably be the funniest outcome, because that would make the raging debates of like cycles are not dead, and all you people claim this and it wasn't different this time. And I'm more in your camp, Brady, but I'll just say it would be funny if that what I just described happens.
It would be funny. And I think one of the most fun parts about it would be these institutions getting into Bitcoin. How are they going to react, right? Because we've weathered these 80+% drops in the past, and it tests your conviction. And even the strongest hodlers among us might start to get a little bit of doubt at certain levels. And it would be interesting to see how the big institutions would react if you're down 50%. Do they just pile on and continue to sell, and it drives that dip even much lower? There's like a blow off bottom. Certainly still possible. I would be curious to see the resolve of relatively new entrants into the market. Anyway, should be fun to watch. It's always drama, right?
Never a dull moment.
Never a dull moment. Let's play this. I wanted to tee up this. Where is it? This right here from Wicked. ECA. So you're buying $50 a week in Bitcoin versus gold. The green line is the amount invested. So that's just they're stepping up $50 a week. Now we're all the way up into 2023. All right, so as of I love these visualizations. So as of, let's see. Well, I have something blocking the screen. What does it say, John?
It's basically
You've invested
3.
Yeah, you invested what? $13,000, $14,000?
15.
$15,000, and we're at 63K now. It's pretty good returns. DCA is a really good strategy. I just set it and forget it, like it's a mortgage payment or a car payment or something, and just you can do that on Swan. Set up an automatic payment. You can set up automatic withdrawals if that's what you want to do for self-custody. You can withdraw it to your Swan Vault, so you have multi-sig self-custody, and that's it. That's like a really good, I think, sort of merit badge for Bitcoiners is you've got a recurring buy, DCA, dollar cost average, and you're withdrawing to self-custody, whether that's your own setup or Swan Vault, which is basically collaborative or assisted self-custody. That's kind of the dream, the Bitcoin dream.
Can we call it the gold standard? Does that not work anymore?
I do that a lot in my head whenever I say something's the gold standard, right? I'm like, can I say Bitcoin standard? No, it just seems a little awkward still for people who are not within Bitcoin already.
You're making me think of it was sometime in the last year, or maybe a little over a year ago. Jerome Powell was on TV and he was trying to dismiss Bitcoin by calling it just like digital gold.
Yeah.
I was like, do you know how people view gold? Like all these expressions in our language, like good as gold, gold standard, place is a gold mine. There's like 5 others.
Pure gold.
Pure gold. Like, he's trying to dismiss it by being like, oh, it's just gold. Don't worry about it, guys.
Yeah, right. only the best monetary standard that we've found in the past, 2,000, 3,000 years. Let's take a quick look at what's going on over in Europe, guys. There's a digital euro that's been proposed by the European Central Bank. This is on top of I don't have a clip for this, but the digital ID that seems to be, it's rolling out, right? Or is it just being discussed in the UK? I'm not sure. But the digital euro keeps you in control of your money. Does it? What do we call that? Control of your money? I don't know. Your choices and your future in an increasingly fragmented world, says the executive board member of the ECB. It's a digital form of cash that can protect Europe's freedom. Now, that's an interesting phrase right there. Europe's freedom. Is that like the freedom of the country or the freedom of the central bank? Or is that the people of Europe? The way they phrased it there is, I think, a little bit of a giveaway. So here we are looking at the CBDC, the central bank digital currency for the ECB. Are we getting closer and closer to this being a reality? Is it inevitable? What do you guys think?
I sure hope not. This is terrible. Rest in peace, UK, as one example. But yeah, Europe, the ECB, they just don't stop, and they're not going to stop. And I hope the people will at some point wake up and realize what little freedoms they have left over there, they can lose.
Yeah. What is the digital ID situation, guys? I'm going to look it up real quick. I remember seeing something about it this week, that the prime minister was talking about issuing digital IDs, and you cannot work in the UK unless you have a valid digital ID.
So I'm no expert on it, but I'll say the most telling clip I saw was it was a policymaker coming on like a news show and trying to explain how it's going to work. And a person on the other end, like the host, was saying, okay, how does this work? And they said what you said, Brady, was like, if you want to get hired by someone, you have to have one of these digital IDs. So then the guy's like, okay, fine. Let's say I'm in my job and I'm just continuing to work my job. The policymaker woman was like, oh, well, then we're not going to make it a problem for you, something like that. And the guy was like, okay, so if I'm like older and I, retired or something like that, like, I guess it's not a problem for me. But then it did get uncomfortable at one point. I forget what scenario he then brought up. And I mean, but basically, like, eventually everyone's going to need it, right? Like these are how these government programs start. They just said, no, it's just for this subset of people doing this one activity. Don't worry about it. It's not going to affect your life whatsoever.
And it's about safety and security, right?
It's about safety and security. And in this one, like they actually are using it under the guise of like, we want to stop people working here illegally, which like presumably a lot of citizens are probably supportive of in concept. But just, how they're going about it. I will just say this too. I was chatting about this with some friends, and if anyone's a listener in the show, you probably heard me say this a million times. I consider myself a libertarian, small government, free markets type person. I do believe that sovereign nations need some form of identification for people. I'm not a pure, anarcho-capitalist like that. I'm not that extreme. I believe you do need some way to identify your citizens. You need a border, like all this kind of stuff. Where I think it goes wrong is when it's digital and when the government is just controlling it. And this is not news to Bitcoiners, but then it's like an on-off switch.
Yeah.
If you get the passport piece of paper and you can show it, that's way different than a digital ID. So the digital nature of what they're doing in the UK is what scares me tremendously.
Yeah. Although even with the passport, they're going to catch you at KYC choke points, just like the financial system, right? It just makes it a lot easier if you have a digital ID. Is basically what you're saying.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
Exactly.
Yeah, for our European friends, it's basically like, how has that gone since you adopted the euro? How has your nation gotten better? And you're trusting the same people now to roll this out and have success? I mean, I think that's just ludicrous, and they should, to Matt's point, at some point you gotta say enough is enough. But it gets tricky, and I won't get myself in too much trouble, and we'll stick to Bitcoin. But there's major issues in Europe for sure.
Well, the golden goose too is like, okay, let's attach your health records to this, right? They're going to want to stop people's movement, maybe. So it's not just about like just having a digital, passport or license or whatever. I mean, they could attach your whole life and just turn off your bank account like they did in Canada with the truckers.
Yeah, and this is the same country that, if I can believe what I see online, is actually sending police to people's homes because of their activity on social media.
Yes.
So at some point, doesn't take a rocket scientist. They're already claiming that certain of your behaviors online are illegal. It's not going to be that hard I know they're not doing it on day one, but it's not going to be that hard for them to be like, hey, your digital ID is frozen for the time being because of what you did online.
Yeah.
Keeps you in control of your money, right? No, it takes all the control of your money away from you completely, and they can at their own whim. This happens in China. There's other countries I think this is happening in already, and you can just turn off access to bank accounts. It happened in Canada, right, with the trucker protest.
I mean, the digital ID stuff in Vietnam, I think that was within the last couple of weeks, a lot of people that, it's just not there.
Yeah.
And you have to agree to it or it's gone.
Yeah. And it's always couched in this idea of safety and security of the population. So it plays off fear of citizens. The Patriot Act was just a broad, very wide, and like just endorsement of the NSA and the CIA, especially the NSA, to just spy on, a much wider net of people. And as we found out through Snowden, included American citizens through, the Patriot Act, which was done in the wake of 9/11, which, played off the fear of terrorism. And there you go. So we as citizens are way too easily, persuaded to give up rights and freedoms in exchange for some marginal, and in some cases, no, and maybe even a detriment to your safety and security. So again, they're doing it with all of these control mechanisms, including CBDCs and digital IDs, and Bitcoin is a way to opt out of that. You can hold your own money, hold your own wealth, control it. Nobody can stop you from moving Bitcoin on the network as long as you have your private key. And this is just fundamentally important to the world. It's one of the reasons, maybe the main reason I'm here, is to maintain freedom for individuals in the face of such authoritarian overreach. And it's happening all over the world.
Amen to that.
Well, we've got a couple of clips we can play and react to. We've got a few more minutes. So here is Saylor on CNBC this week.
I do want to start with the fact that there are reports that you were in Washington last week meeting with policymakers about this strategic Bitcoin reserve bill. How are you advising lawmakers right now, and why is the case there to create a strategic reserve?
Well, I think Bitcoin's good for the nation, and then the country would benefit. We did buy something like 78% of the entire United States for about $40 million over the past 100 years or so. So I think
100 years
the
wrong,
United States ought to own a large part of cyberspace, and Bitcoin is the next frontier.
What does it do to prices?
Bitcoin is the next frontier. This is the strategic reserve, guys. And John was talking about this a little earlier. Maybe, is it going to happen or is it not? Saylor keeps talking about it. We were promised 90 days from the signing of the executive order, which would have been the beginning of the summer, roughly, to get a plan on what the United States is doing moving forward. So let's just couple minutes. Is this even important? This SBR, and if it is important, how would you, go about adopting or stacking Bitcoin as a nation? Like John said, you have an incentive to keep it under wraps for as long as possible, right? So you can not move the market too much.
I gave most of my thoughts on it. I probably could share a little bit more, but I'm curious what Isaiah and Matt have to say first.
I think they just haven't cleared out Bohein's desk yet. Everything's almost done. It's just sitting there. They haven't found it.
It's right underneath the Epstein papers.
Something like that. Yes, it's important. I think if you want to see the U.S. be successful longer term, Bitcoin is money for both friends and foes. And I think if we don't adopt it, someone else will, and it makes sense to. I think you can see how El Salvador has adopted Bitcoin and how it's helped kind of stem change there. And it would be really, really helpful, I think, for the U.S. to do some other things. Also, I think there's other things more important than adopting the SBR. But I think the SBR can be a part of the plan to help fix and right some of the issues in decline that we've seen in the United States. And I mean, is Loomis's bill perfect? And the ideas of that she has, that to hold it for 20 years, pay off half the debt. I don't know if it's perfect. I think you could change a couple different things with it, but it's all right. I think it's still better than not doing it. How do you fund it? I think the idea of things being like a net neutral, there's lots of different ways that they can look at doing that, whether it's shrinking the size of government, getting rid of buildings, selling off assets. I don't think public land sales is a good idea. So I would agree with my friends out west, kind of out where Matt's at. Like, I don't like that. But what you can do is you could allow for energy independence, and you could open up mineral rights and do leasing and have drilling, and then have all the the cash flow from that turn into Bitcoin, right? And I think that's how you could turn natural resources, hard asset into hard asset. Also refill the strategic petroleum reserve, which Biden had run through to help protect the Democratic election process for re-election in the campaign to stifle out inflation. So there's lots of different ways to fund it, but in a budget neutral way, I think that's probably the easiest one. We are a very rich country with natural resources, so develop them, use that for the reshoring efforts, for keeping energy costs down, for doing all the things that Trump has talked about. To me, it ties in together fairly nicely.
Nice.
If it's truly strategic, to John's point, like they should be doing this quietly and behind the scenes. I don't know if our listeners out there have read Soft War by Jason Lowery, right? But with game theory too, it's like it's not something you want to just necessarily announce. If it's truly, if you're serious about it and it's strategic, we've probably done slowly, methodically, and quietly.
I think that's a hard one for Trump to do quietly, but maybe they are doing it right now. We don't know. They could be.
He doesn't do too much quietly, does he?
No. But I mean, they could be doing it right now. We don't know.
Okay, we'll take a look at. I think this is the founder of Telegram, right? Pavel Rusnak. I don't have his last name written here, so that's from memory. But let's take a look.
If you've been an early supporter of cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, you've bought into Bitcoin early on, you kept buying. Maybe you could speak to the reasoning why you kept buying Bitcoin. Do you think Bitcoin will go to $1 million? Do you think it'll keep increasing?
I was a big believer in Bitcoins since more or less the start of it. I got to buy my first few thousand of Bitcoin in 2013, and I didn't care much. I think I bought at the local maximum, something like $700 per Bitcoin, and I just threw a couple of millions there. And a lot of people after Bitcoin later next year went down, somewhere close to 300, 200, started to express their sympathy to me. They say, "Oh, you poor fellow, you made this horrible mistake investing in this new thing, but don't feel bad about it. We still have some respect for you." And my response to them was, I don't care. I'm not going to sell it. I believe in this thing. I think this is the way money should work. Nobody can confiscate your Bitcoin from you. Nobody can censor you for political reasons. This is the ultimate means of exchange. So I have been able to fund my lifestyle, so to say, from my Bitcoin investment. Some people think if I'm able to rent nice locations or fly private, it's because I somehow extract money from Telegram. Like I said, Telegram is a money-losing operation for me personally. Bitcoin is something that allowed me to stay afloat, and I believe it will come to a point when Bitcoin is worth $1 million. Just look at the trends. The governments keep printing money like no tomorrow. Nobody's printing Bitcoin. There is predictable inflation, and then it stops. It's a certain point. Bitcoin is here to stay. All the fiat currencies remains to be seen.
Remains to be seen. From studying monetary history, we know what happens to fiat currencies, right? Even the global reserve currencies have a clock ticking on them from the time they start debasement. And again, usually done for a, good reason. Printed a whole bunch of money during COVID. This is an interesting question, right? That I get from some friends, and we're talking about Keynesianism and money printing and just the fiat regime and how it works. And they're skeptical about Bitcoin. They say, well, if we couldn't have printed $3 trillion during COVID, the world would have just broken down completely and nobody would have had money, and it would have been even worse, right? Same thing about the Great Depression. If we hadn't gone off the gold standard during the Great Depression, it would have been even worse. So this is I think one of the most credible sounding pushbacks against the idea of a deflationary money. And have you guys been asked this question and thought about an answer at all over the years?
Oh yeah, plenty. I think I totally know what you're getting at. My response on the COVID one, I think that's more of an open and shut case. It would be like, yeah, we wouldn't have been able to lock down the economy. And I think even medically and health-wise, we would have been better off too. I know some people would debate that, but I think that just would have been a better outcome all around. Where I think it's kind of the steel man is more like a military argument. So let's say, I've had so many conversations about Bitcoin in the past week. I can't remember if I've talked about this on Swan Signal before or if it was with someone in real life, but let's just imagine that the United States, instead of Mexico on the border, pick like one of our bigger allies. Let's just say it's China. And let's say China is using money printing and true socialism to basically milk their citizens like farm animals, right? And build up a military. And they're doing it right on the border of the United States. And the United States is a sound money. It's not even, let's say it's the United States. Let's say it's like more libertarian. It's like 15,000 Luxembourgs, like these small city states, right? I would probably prefer to live in that world where it's like these small principalities that's more local, not a big centralizing force, and sound money, right? What if that on the border, that China, whereas Mexico is like about to invade you, and you have to coordinate between 15,000 Luxembourgs? The best answer is you all coordinate, you use your resources without inflation, and you fight the enemy. I think we know that just human nature, it's difficult to do that. So to me, that scenario would be the best argument for, hey, we have a life or death situation here. We have an enemy at our border. We are going to use inflation because it's the easiest way to corral resources.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's ideal, but that's the steelman argument for use inflation to corral resources to achieve a certain goal.
Correct. And it is a difficult choice, right? And you're faced, like, this is why fiat inevitably becomes debased. In that situation, you would have to have saved for such a situation. Like in a household, you might have some savings to weather a really difficult storm, some health crisis, for instance. And if you can't print your own money, so you either need to borrow or you need to save in order to address those situations. In a Bitcoin world, I do agree you might have more Luxembourg type entities, fewer massive centralized federal governments like the US. And in fact, the United States was founded under the principle that, the federal government had very limited scope. And one of them was to defend the country. For that eventuality, that you need some kind of military force to deter an invasion or to protect yourself from invasion. And so that was one of the main sort of charges of the federal government, was to protect the nation. And there were very few others. Most of the powers were given to the states. And I think in a situation like that, you might have some kind of like security covenant, security pacts between more local nation state like entities. And there would be, I think, some kind of pact basically, and everybody would, like a NATO or something, and everybody would contribute, and money would be saved and spent on the defense of this, these loosely associated autonomous city states. And yeah, so I mean, if you don't save, then you can't print more Bitcoin, right? And so there might be a world where there's a lot of fiat money still floating around, and those come and they come and die because they are useful in situations like that. It's kind of the easy way out. But a strong group of autonomous city states would have saved up enough Bitcoin and resources to defend themselves in a situation like that. And that would be the way to go. Otherwise, you have to borrow, issue bonds, borrow from other nations, etc.
I'm sure you guys know the real example of this with, it's highlighted in Saifedean's, I think it's in the Bitcoin Standard. In the beginning of World War I, the Bank of England, the Treasury of England basically did a bond raise, a government bond raise, and it was like very undersubscribed, basically signaling that most Brits didn't want to enter the war against Germany. And they did what was like effectively QE, but they didn't even tell anyone. They like put in a fake bid for the bonds, told everyone it was oversubscribed.
Yes.
The Financial Times played their mouthpiece and wrote an article in a paper that said it was oversubscribed. Like 100 years later, the FT themselves admitted that, hey, like, we lied about this. We're coming clean now. But the point is that they did exactly what, that hypothetical we just walked through. It's like, hey, Germany's militarizing. We want to defeat them, and we're going to use inflation to do it, stealth inflation. There might be some people that say that was the right move, because if the counter scenario is like Germany just kind of wins World War I, now you get into a million different historical counterfactuals of like, would they dominate the whole continent? Would it just be like a more German influenced continent? Yeah. So I'm not going to go there, but again, I think that is the steel man for the best case to use inflation to achieve an end goal.
I think the idea that's not discussed enough in reaction to that question about, what do you need some kind of fiat money so that you can print money in an emergency, right? You need that kind of flexibility. One answer, of course, is to save or to raise money through something like bonds. And this doesn't really get talked about too much. What is the potential end of maintaining the integrity of your money in the face of an emergency, right? Versus continuing to debase the money in the face of an emergency over time. So what are the harms of, the death of a fiat money over a couple of generations, and all that means, including what millennials and Gen Alpha or whatever the generation after millennials is, they are suffering through the effects of inflation right now. So what are the harms there? So you are perhaps going in to fight this war or defending yourself against an incursion. You have to weigh also that never really gets done, the potential harms, because it's in the future and you don't really know that outcome because you're not going down that path. But it's a lot of like very, very harmful fiat money, especially late stage fiat money, is extremely harmful to society. And that doesn't really get weighed because it's sort of this nebulous concept.
So I feel like this gets into fourth turning conversation.
Yeah.
And talking about the fourth turning with a bunch of colleagues and clients and Bitcoiners over the past few days, one thing that came, yes, Max, I accept your nomination. I'll be president. Saylor can be vice president. There was an interesting realization. I'm sure this has been made before. Brandon Quittem knows the fourth turning 100 times better than I do. I just listen to him talk about it. But if the 3 fourth turnings that have happened so far in the U.S., American Revolution, Civil War, and the Depression / World War II, the first 2, the Revolution and the Civil War, we ended up, that was the chaotic period. The period following it was this period of like flourishing and individual liberties being maximized and governments being minimized.
Yep.
Obviously with the founding of the country, but then after the Civil War, the Gilded Age, the late 1800s to the early 1900s is known as this, like the Gilded Age. We built incredible architecture, institutions. Some of the modern best like foundations of the modern world were built during that time.
Yeah, lots of creativity, invention. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So there's like 7 groundbreaking inventions that happened during that time. But then you look at the next one, the Depression and World War II. That it was the period that followed that was not the same. We got Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, these New Deal programs. The income tax became more widespread. So you absolutely cannot say that fourth turning resulted in a period of more individual liberty and less government. It was the opposite. It was less liberty, more government. So I just thought that was interesting. It's not a foregone conclusion of what type of period you get after a fourth turning. And I think the debate it obviously brings up is what type of period do we get after this fourth turning? I'm just starting to think about that question this week, but if you need to kill some time with Bitcoiners, this is definitely a good one.
Yeah, it is. All right, guys, any closing thoughts? Isaiah, Matt?
Yeah, I've talked enough. You guys go.
So
I love it.
All you, Matt.
You go, Isaiah.
All right. All I was going to say was from John's comment there. Like, yeah, we have the option as we go through this fourth turning of what the future does look like. And I think the onus is on everyone on this call and everyone on, that's listening to this as well. Like we all can make the impact in our own small way. And it is dictated. And this is one thing going back to DC, talking about the monolith that is the government. It's actually just made up of individuals, right? It's not this big org. It's individuals. And so each individual has a role to play. And I think we can't like not take ownership of our own situations and helping guide and shape the world that comes after this. And obviously we all believe Bitcoin plays a huge role in that. And I truly, truly do believe in that. So yeah, don't opt out of your role in all this and just think like if you don't have a position or don't do something, that things are going to just magically happen, because you can't be passive is the word that I would use there. You can't be a passive observer as we go through this, because we do want to make sure that we see a golden age. That's what I want. That's what I want for my kids.
Yeah, I would just agree with everything that's been said, and just maybe add, like, if we're going through a period of pandemonium and chaos, I mean, nobody wants to see kinetic wars. I like to view this fourth turning like a little bit rosier of a lens, to say, maybe this is just about the monetary change of incorporating Bitcoin, going back to sound money, and maybe throw the AI revolution in there and some new breakthroughs in technology that are gonna be really beneficial. And so I'm trying to stay positive.
Yeah, I think coming out the other side of the fourth turning, you go kind of back into the first phase, which is an 80 to 100 year cycle. What's the next phase look like? Usually it ends with a lot of distrust in centralized institutions. And then there's this kind of renewal or refresh. And John talked about the last two of them. And I'm hopeful that this one will really be focused on decentralized systems and protocols like Nostr, like Bitcoin, to help us coordinate in a more free individual to individual type way, not having to go through these centralized institutions. And I think that Bitcoin and protocols like Nostr are ready. They're sufficiently advanced to be able to take on the sort of the level of adoption that we would need for that to really make a big difference. So it's interesting time for sure. Lots of unanswered questions, and kind of hard to predict what will happen with everything sort of hitting that technological asymptote, going off into this singularity where we just don't know what it's going to be like with AI and robots and all of that, like how things are going to shake out. But I do think it will be a world where we'll have more individual empowerment, and we'll be interacting with each other on a peer-to-peer basis without relying on centralized institutions. So we're here for that. That's why we're all, here, and we also want to watch the number go up. So interesting times. Thanks for joining us. Keep coming back on Fridays. We'll keep having these conversations as Bitcoin does its thing over the next many years. Please do also join us at Swan. You can go to swan.com and check out our offerings there. We'll help you invest in Bitcoin, build your Bitcoin wealth. We do build strong relationships. Each one of these guys works with a set of clients, and we a lot of times become friends with our clients, and really invest in the long term, building generational wealth for their family. So we're thinking decades and decades of long relationships with clients, and really helping them take the most advantage out of this opportunity with Bitcoin. We offer Swan Private, which is your way to get a direct connection with a Bitcoin expert on our team, ask your questions, get help on your strategy, on executing that strategy, on security, safety, navigating this new money. Speaking of security and safety, you can use Swan Vault, which is a advanced Bitcoin cold storage. It's a self-custody. You get 2 keys out of 3 that need to be used to move your Bitcoin, and you hold 2 of them. Your Swan account has another called the Cloud Key that you can use to sign transactions. If something happens to Swan, you have your 2 keys, so you're in complete control of your money, but you don't have to go it alone with Swan Vault. And Swan IRA is a great way to stack sats. We looked at that chart about DCAing, dollar cost averaging, or just recurring buys. Great place to do that in a tax advantaged way is with the Bitcoin IRA. You can check that out as well. We have a nice calculator on this page. You can scroll down and put in your own assumptions about Bitcoin's performance and your age and your IRA balance. If you want, you can roll over an existing IRA. That's one of the best ways. If you're, start getting into Bitcoin, you're like, okay, your conviction's increasing and you really want to make an allocation. If you don't have a lot of spare cash in your savings, you can roll over IRAs into a Bitcoin IRA at Swan, and we'll help you with the whole process. It's super smooth. So we'd love to work with you.